Hi, everyone. Welcome to my page. I'm Tammy Cho, as you guys all know, and you guys know I'm passionate about really helping people see and understand themselves at a deeper level. And so I have a special guest with all of you. This is Kathy Kasten. Welcome. And
Hello.
we are going to dive into um, have a deeper dive into a deep dive of understanding what this is all about. And she's also offering a gift of sort of walking me through my assessment that I have completed, which I try not to read very much of, so I could really give a very beginner's version of my reflections as you walk us through this as an expert. So welcome again, Kathy.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here today, Tammy.
Great. I'm just going to read Kathy's bio. I obviously don't have it memorized, but I would like to introduce you to where Kathy's takes her time and spends her heart. Because so far, my connections with you, Kathy, is very heart centered. So very, very happy to promote you here.
Thank
And
you.
so, yeah, you're welcome. And so, Kathy Kasten, the corporate alpaca ice cream lady, is the founder and CEO of Lions Crest Leadership. With a background in both small businesses ownership and corporate management, Kathy is recognized internationally for her skills in helping other people grow their leadership, build a meaningful relationship, and live a legacy they want to leave. She is an executive coach, business consultant, keynote speaker, trainer, best-selling award-winning author of Discover Your Team's Potential and Ready, Set, Lead, online course creator, advanced certified disc consultants, and she has been a guest expert on numerous national and international podcasts, and of course, a blessed wife, mom, and grandmother. Welcome again, Kathy. And you have a wealth of knowledge from just reading your bio. And today we're just experiencing a small part of Kathy and her expertise. And so Kathy, I just want to start off. I always find it's nice to know where someone came from and why you do what you do. Would you mind sort of speaking a bit about, yeah, what started you on this journey and with DISC and things like this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I really love serving people at a deep level. That's at the center and core of who I am. And I have spent my entire adult life in leadership. I started in a corporate job after my experience in college. And through a number of different steps, actually walked through some different businesses. I left corporate. And all throughout my entire journey, I've always been engaged in leadership with communities, with businesses, with different volunteer organizations that I worked with. And one of the things that I've searched for through all of it is how do I understand who I am better and how do I use those gifts? And then secondarily, how do I understand other people better? And how do I talk to them in a way that says, you matter? I really want to help you and serve you. And so I'm not a big tool lover in most cases. I'm a kind of a free spirit, but I had been looking for a long time to find a tool that would help me improve my communication. And so on my journey about 5 or 6 years ago now, I was exposed to DISC for the first time and really loved the idea of it. I think what really struck me about it was it's wonderful to understand ourselves. And there are a lot of great assessments, as you're going to be talking about this week, that show us different pieces about who we are and how we work. But most of them don't give us a lot of help in then communicating with somebody else and understanding how they work. So I was looking for something simple that did both. And I love this tool so much. And it has transformed my business. It's transformed my clients' businesses and lives. I have every single client I work with now take a disc with me when I start because it's amazing to see what can happen after that. So that's a really fast nutshell answer for you.
Yeah, and honestly, before meeting you, I actually haven't ever heard of this. So I'm so grateful to blend our worlds together and really learn about it and really learn about it deeply because it's on me actually. And so I love to highlight for people like what exactly is a DISC assessment? Like we know it's some sort of assessment. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
Sure. One of the things I'm going to say right out of the gate is it's not a test. Okay. Because I think sometimes people feel like they're going to pass or fail. That's not the goal of a DISC assessment at all. There is no pass or fail. everybody is created as a masterpiece. There are certain things in all of us that we really shine at, but we don't always recognize them or know how to use them. So this DISC assessment really looks at what's your personality. And once it understands your personality with 24 simple questions, then it starts to explain to us how that affects your behaviors. And those behaviors are things we can predict. So for instance, Kathy speaks quickly, and then we'll go into that with DISC, but that's something that comes from my personality. And so because I speak quickly, you can anticipate that all of my life I will probably speak quickly. So when you're talking to me, there are things you can do to adjust to that. That's a really simple example, but it gives us a chance to quickly and clearly, and I think very simply, which is one of the powerful pieces of DISC. It's simple. You get a great glimpse right away. You have tools within the first hour that you can start to use. I tell people the assessment is like the alphabet. It's a library after that that's available to you of all the things that you can do to apply it. But at least we start with the alphabet, four simple letters, and we're off and running. And so that's kind of the base of it. One of the things I want to say too about DISC, it's a public domain assessment, which means that I could create one tonight and put it on the market tomorrow and sell it, and I could have no scientific validation at all. So you might think you're getting a great assessment, and it might just be Kathy just decided randomly to place things. So I went to a lot of work to find, out of the last I had checked, there were over 50 organizations that offer DISC. There's probably 2 or 3 on the market that are good. And so making sure that you don't just take that free DISC and assume that's right. A lot of them have 4 to 12 plot points, no scientific background. The company I work with, it's 39,000 plot points. They've been in business for 35 years. They've worked all over the world. They've worked in government. They've worked with private, corporate, Fortune 500. So there's a lot of background and scientific validation, and it's actually quite high. I have a report if anybody wants to see it. So it's good to know that that varies. Some of the other assessments out there are not public domain. So DISC can vary a lot depending on the company you purchase it from.
Wow, that's a good thing to know, right? Because you just think, oh, DISC, and you think it's the same thing. And so I'm hearing that some may not be validated or as, just as valid, as accurate. Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. And maybe that's maybe you want to share with us how to decipher the two, but maybe we could just go into it for them to experience it. And we could put your info in the link so they know there's someone more valid that they could go to. Yes, yes.
Good.
Okay, and I just want to check in, like, so with the DISC, who would you say it's for and most effective with, or is it just for everyone? Just want to touch base on that.
Well, this is another great question, actually. Depending on the company, there may be one option. The company I work with, another thing I loved about them is there is a DISC literally for everyone, pretty much. We have 4 levels of adult, from a really simple one to a leadership level. We have one for children 5 and up. We have one for teens. There's a hiring DISC, a fitness DISC, a sales DISC, Spanish and French.
Wow.
So there are a lot of options within the organization that I work through with those DISC assessments. In my experience for the work that I do, I have had DISCs done by executives, by entrepreneurs, by professionals, by parents. I've had anybody in that group above also have their spouses take it, their children take it, their their nonprofit group they're involved in take it. So it's really been fun. And in my own life, I actually did one for my whole family, from the great grandparents down to the great grandchildren, and we're all on a DISC graph together, which is so fun to have that piece of information. So it
that would be
a lot of ways. Yeah, it's fun.
I mean, that is amazing that there's so much diversity. I love that a lot of tests you can't do it for kids. And so it's very interesting. And maybe like the questionnaire is different or something like that. I don't know, but
Yes,
I think that's amazing. And I love the family tree of DISC-ness that you've created for your family.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Maybe just quickly highlight quick differences between DISC assessments and other assessments, just to get a bit of an idea, because I think people that are interested in self-discovery, they've probably done a range of things. And so how does one decipher what is the best thing, and how is this different?
Well, I'm going to say two things about that. One, I don't want to speak for the others who are going to have a lot more experience and knowledge. I have certainly taken the bulk of the assessment types that are out there. Enneagram, Strength Finders, Myers-Briggs is an older one that a lot of people would be familiar with. What I would say is, in general, they measure different things. So it's kind of like when you go to the doctor and one will do a heart check on you, another one is taking your temperature. We've got a blood pressure cuff, right? It's all measuring something different. I would say
Mm,
it's kind of that same idea with assessments in general. That one is measuring strengths, ours measures behaviors that come from personalities. So there can be some crossover in the fact that sometimes you'll hear traits that may line up as a strength that also makes sense in the behavior world. So there can be a little bit of crossover. Again, I'm a pretty biased, so I'm just going to say that up front. I really love DISC as a base core start place because of its simplicity. Some of the others have a lot more variables. So as an example, and I'm not as much of an expert in that as some of your guests will be, but I think there's 34 strengths. And I've taken strength finders, I've taken the leadership strength finders, but if I'm going into a room with 100 other people, there's no way I can remember everybody's top 5 strengths, or it's just too much. I need simple. So DISC
mm,
is, I think what really sets it apart for me is that it's super simple and that it's very easy to start to use it in a communication with other people as well. So I don't have to
mm.
work hard to start to translate.
Okay, beautiful. I see that. It's nice and quick for us to get it, but also for someone else to know and then kind of know how to relate to you. So it's really quick to sort of put into practical everyday use. That's what I'm
Right.
hearing. I really
Right.
see this benefiting, whether it's a team or a family, like really, so that's beautiful. And so I think we're gonna dive into your assessment towards me, but I just want to make sure there's not something that you want to cover right before we dive into it so people are not sort of lost going in. Is there any like aspects, and maybe speak about the one that you're walking me through, because you said that there are so many.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so in general, I think before we look at yours, let me just say to everybody that's listening or watching this, imagine that we're all living on a globe, right? So just think of the globe of the world. Everybody has a home place, a relaxed spot, a sit down and have a cup of hot cocoa place that's just like natural, and that's home. We go home there. But we can travel anywhere in the world we want at any time if we don't have COVID. So it's the same idea in DISC. While there are 4 different quadrants in DISC, and you'll see it portrayed as a circle, just like a globe, you'll see
Mhm.
a spot where you live. That's your comfy place. That's your natural, this is who I am spot where I can just breathe and relax. That doesn't mean that you can't travel anywhere else on that DISC circle at any time. And you have bits of all of the quadrants in you. Everybody does. So it's a matter of how strong are those pieces and how
Mhm.
much work is it for me to go elsewhere on that globe. So, as an example, you and I live in the Northern Hemisphere here. For us to go from Canada to the United States is not a huge trip, especially since I'm in Minnesota. But if I want to go to Africa, that's a big trip for me. I'm going to have to pack differently. I'm going to have to prepare more, probably have to do some special shopping. Coming to see you probably would be less preparation than a trip like that. It's the same in the
Mhm.
disc world.
Mhm.
So once we understand where we live and I start to describe that more to you, then we start to realize where are going to be the people that are harder for us to understand or don't understand us as well. How do we get there in a good manner? What kind of a kit do we need to pack, or a suitcase that helps us to have a better experience when we get there, and also for them too? So that's kind of a really simple preface of DISC. Again, that we have all the pieces. It's just what are our stronger areas? And also, one of the things that I will say about the company I work with, we really stress the positive gifts you have in those personalities that are your strong suits.
Mhm.
One of the silly examples I give is of a mountain and a lake. If a mountain wants to be a lake and spends its whole life saying, I wish I were a lake, it's going to be lost, right? It's never going to be a lake. Kathy's never going to be an
Yeah.
Olympic swimmer. I'm never going to be a gold medalist. Even if I would like it and would swim the rest of my life, it's not going to happen. So part of it is embracing who we are, celebrating that, And then
Mhm.
also embracing who everybody else is and what they can bring in to complement us rather than compete with us. How can they make it? Because if we're all shining at our best, now we have a full, beautiful mountain range or an amazing big ocean, right? Of all this talent. And that's really what the goal of DISC is to let us experience at the higher levels what we're wonderful at and recognize the areas where we could bring other people in to shine.
Mhm. You know, I think that's beautiful because like if you're trying to be a fish on land, you know, you're never going to feel good about yourself. And so, yeah, this is that part, right? Really seeing and understanding ourselves and yeah, like partnering with people with the strengths that you don't have. And so it's a
Right.
beautiful world if we could do that, right?
And I will tell you, I've been in meetings on multiple occasions with very seasoned professionals where they've ended up in tears. And I still remember today one conversation I had. The person broke down and actually said, I thought there was something wrong with me
Hmm.
because I wasn't like everybody else in the company. And this
Yeah,
particular
wow.
company had a lot of people with similar personalities, and they weren't one of those personality types. And so there was a lot of stress and tension, and people didn't really understand them well, didn't appreciate them. For them to realize you've been trying to be who you're not, and it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to celebrate that. It just was transformational for that person. And that
Mhm.
was beautiful because that freed them then to be themselves and not to feel like they had to be all of those other personalities.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you speak about that, it just brings me a time when I was bullied where my experience was just totally different from someone else. Yet yeah, I was just in the wrong place is what I discovered. And there was obviously revulsion, you know, and that's okay. But I could see how I'm interested to learn for myself, you know, how I am and making those connections on all these things that happened into my life now. And so
Yes.
yeah, I'm excited to learn
Yay.
more.
Well, I'm excited. Let's take a look at it, and I'll maybe do a little bit more description as we go through some of the basics at the beginning. And I think we could go ahead and start just with that first simple picture of the disc model. And that way people can kind of see what we're talking about, and I'll describe it too.
Oh, let me try that again.
Okay.
Okay. And so let me slideshow this.
There we go. Perfect.
How's that? Okay.
Yes. Okay, so what you're looking at in this first image is really, again, the globe of disc. And I want you to not spend a lot of time on the words around the circle right now. Just look at the circle and think of the equator that goes across the middle and see that there's a D and I above and a C and S below. So anything above the equator, those are people who their strongest personality trait is very outgoing. That means that they are moving at a quick pace. Kathy lives in this half of the world, as you would guess. So fast pace, there's a lot more descriptors that come, but basically that's where we start. When I'm using an example of this, I might put a race car up at the top. So the top half of the circle is race car, okay? The bottom half is really a walking person, more relaxed, more reserved, slower pace. There's nothing better or worse about either one. It's just how we approach life in general because of our personalities. 40% of the world lives in that top portion of the circle, the faster pace. 60% lives in the more relaxed pace. And one of the things I will say is, in general, we don't have a lot of conflict with people that are different than us in that fast versus relaxed. It might irritate us a little bit, but we all adjust pretty well. We're finding that about 10 to 20% of major conflicts come from that. So it's pretty small. Conflict comes if you split this circle the other way, where you're splitting the D and C on one side and the I and S on a side. Now we're talking about big conflict. Here's where the conflict comes from. The DC side, which is a small amount, is task oriented first. So my main focus, and I am a D first, so I live in one of those two quadrants. My main focus is to do a task. People will misunderstand that task people are only thinking about the thing to be done and not about the people around them. We can seem sometimes callous, withdrawn, because we're very focused. And I think the misconception that comes is the reason we do the tasks is because we love the people and want to help them, but the task is how we help them. And so now you've got the other side of the fence, which is your I's and S's, which is 2/3 of the population. That is people oriented first. So they're not as concerned about the task and how it gets done, as long as everybody's happy and we're all in agreement as to making sure nobody gets left behind. So they're very people focused. So that can come across to someone who lives on the task side is not serious about getting things done, not aware of what has to happen in order to take care of those people. So you start to have these conflicts. I'll give you a little tiny example in my own life. My husband is a wonderful S and I am a D. And the hardest people typically for us to communicate are the ones that are diagonal from us on the disc. So Kathy may be preparing for a conversation with Tammy and she's really in the zone, and I'm working hard because I want to serve everybody that we're going to be talking to in this discussion. And my husband pops his head in, let's say, and says, "What should we do this weekend with the grandkids?" Now, that's a wonderful, great intention question, but if I'm in the zone and I'm working, that can be very stressful to me because it's pulling me out of my work thought. So I might respond if I'm having a negative day, "Can't you see I'm trying to get this done?" And his response might be, "Why do you always have to work? Don't you want to take time to think about the family?" Right? I'm making this really simple for everybody to just kind of understand how this can play out. So again, both perspectives have a valid thought. It's just sometimes we don't know how to communicate where we can meet in the middle and recognize that both of these can be true and they both can have value. And how do we have a conversation? So another example is, because my husband is an S, and we're going to talk about that with you too. S's tend to think about things. I want to talk it out. He wants to think it out. And so we have to come to an agreement about what does it look like so that I don't talk to him immediately when he hasn't had time to process and he's not waiting too long to have a conversation with me. So that's kind of some quick information. Of all the 4 quadrants, the D quadrant is called driven. That's about 10% of the world. So it's the smallest. I tell people 90% of the world doesn't understand me and 90% of the world needs me. That's what cheers me up. Then the I group, that's 35%. That's your influencers. That's the people that when they walk in a room, everyone knows they're there. They're like shining stars, people magnets, I call them. They just naturally attract people. They're very vibrant. S's are what I call the teddy bears, but they're called supportives in the disc world. They're very kind. They're always there. They're always supporting the people around them. And then we have the C group, which is your cautious, calculating group. They're the people who are really careful about making sure that processes are in place, every I has been dotted, the T's are crossed, and everything's been thoroughly vetted before it happens. The largest of the 4 quadrants is the S group. That's 35% of the world. I think the Lord knew we needed a lot of kind-hearted, supportive people. So all of these quadrants have amazing gifts that they bring to the table. They also have out of control behaviors because of those personalities. And I can talk about those a little bit maybe when we go into yours, but so that's some of the things that we talk about when we're learning about DISC is, what are my great gifts in this area and what are some blind spots for me that I really need to watch out and surround myself with people in the other quadrants who can help me to be aware of those and to support me in those. So that's kind of a quick, really fast overview. I'm not going to go into much more detail, but at least that gives you kind of a first round. Does that make sense to you, Tammy, in general?
Yeah, it does make sense. And it reminds me perhaps of my relationship with me and my husband, because it's probably, we're in opposite quadrants probably.
Yes, that's very typical. It's really funny. As I've done DISC assessments, I find an awful lot of couples that are opposites. It's like we know we need each other, but then sometimes we can't figure out how to talk to each other. And so that can be really fun. And that can happen in the work environment too. Sometimes I see businesses where I've hired everybody who's like me because I get them and I like them. And now I have this whole company of people with the same blind spot. Or I have a company with a lot of different variations, but they aren't quite sure how to talk to each other because they don't all think alike. So there can be some really interesting dynamics that happen depending on what the organization or the family structure looks like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can see there's a relationship thing is huge, right?
I think it's at the core of everything with business. Again, I believe very much that you need to be profitable as a business, but I also understand that this is so undervalued. I think this may be the biggest piece of all of having a really successful business. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and I can go into those later, but it's a beautiful thing to watch an organization start to really allow their people to shine, because you've got people making better decisions. You've got people that are happier. You have customers who are happier. There's less stress and the drama in the workplace. There are just so many benefits that come as we start to unravel some of this in a group. So I hope that that's a good, at least first explanation for people. And again, I know this is pretty quick topical, but at least that gives you a general idea. So if you want, we can look at yours and we'll talk a little bit about what we saw in your DISC assessment.
Yeah, sure. I'll just move on to the next slide there.
That'd be perfect.
All right. Can you see that?
I cannot, but I can see it a little bit on the side. I'm not sure if everyone else.
Interesting. All right. So there we go. You can see it now, right?
Yes, I certainly can. Yes. And I left that little disc of behavior model up in the corner just to remind everybody. Okay, so Tammy was nice enough to take the leadership disc assessment. I really recommend this for anyone who's in any kind of a leadership position, from parent to entrepreneur. If you're interacting with a lot of different people, the adult assessments give you the same result, regardless of which one you choose with me. You'll get the same result of where you live on the graph. What changes is the report that comes with it. So as an example, the simplest one that I have, I think has 10 pages maybe with it. This one has 65 pages of supporting material, which when you first get it, you may just want to ignore until we've talked, because then I can give you some background. And now the rest of the report's going to make a lot more sense and be a lot more interesting, I think, to apply. But in the case of the leadership, it's as this type of a personality, Tammy, when you're talking to someone in the opposite quadrant, like Kathy, here's some things you can do to adjust in order to have better conversations. That kind of information, some of the basics at least, are in those reports. So that's really valuable to have as a long-term reference. So I always tell people, I think for the small amount of money difference, it's really nice to have that backup support document, just if you want to refer again. But today we're just going to look at one page. I believe this is page 50 in the leadership assessment that you took. This shows me, after you've done your 24 questions in the assessment, which usually takes about 20 minutes for people, it shows me where you land naturally. And you'll see that this calls you an SIC. So any letters that show up as part of your blend mean that you are above the midline of giftedness or personality strength in that area. Okay, so people can have 1, 2, or 3 letters that are above the average space. And there's no right answer. All of them have pluses and minuses. And there is one other group called levels that we're not really going to talk about today. But for you have an SIC blend. So that means your top gift, and you see that on the circle on the right there, is in the supportive area. Now I'm going to tell you a couple of things about the circle that you're looking at on the right. First of all, the closer to the outside of the circle you are, the more obvious your gift sets in your personality are to other people. So if you're out on the edge of an S, like on the blue line at the very outside edge of the globe, people are going to know immediately that Tammy is like really a crazy supportive person. They're just going to know it. You won't have to ever tell them. It's obvious. The closer we get to the center, people don't recognize it as quickly. The plus side for those of us closer to the center, and I live a little closer to the center like you do, we can move around more easily into the other spaces. We don't have to travel as far. So someone who lives on those outside edges may be more obvious in their gift sets, but it's a bigger flight for them to go to the other part of the world. We can take a little smaller suitcase. And it's a little easier typically for us to interact with those other quadrants as we get closer to the center. So that's something for you to know. When you're really close on a border with another letter like you are, you can see that you're very close to the I quadrant. You're going to pretty easily be able to go over and talk to people that are outgoing influencers. And that's going to feel comfortable for you because you're close to that. That's really literally like traveling over a state line, right? Or something like that. So when I'm looking at your circle, the first thing I see is that you are very, because of your personality, you're very people focused. Remember, we're on the right side of the circle. So I know that when I talk to you, I should not come with a large list, probably, of all the tasks that need to be done that day before we talk about how we're going to serve somebody. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
definitely want to connect with someone first.
yes. And I actually, that was a really good learn for me in one of my early coaching endeavors. I had a leader of an organization who was a very high S. And I discovered that when I would come for coaching, if he didn't have 10 to 15 minutes to talk to me about his team first, he couldn't absorb anything I had to say after that. It was like that had to come out. And once he was able to share that with me, then he was ready to go. Kathy is a very let's get to the point and get moving person. And so that was a good adjustment for me to recognize if I really want to help him, then we need to celebrate the team first. And I would say for S's, that's the word I would say probably fits you as team. Okay, so you really care about making sure everybody is valued, everybody is heard, no man nor woman is left behind. You're probably the person who's the last one to leave the room and turn off the lights. You probably carry a lot of extra bags and just all of the, if somebody needs it, you will offer to do it. And I don't know if that's true. How does that resonate for you? What do you think about that?
It definitely resonates with who I used to be as I've built my self-care, self-love boundaries. It's definitely less now. I ask people for help more. And
I love it. I love
yes,
it.
and I've been asking my kids, turn off the light when you leave the room.
That's so good. And I will tell you, it's funny you bring that up because one of the big challenges for people who are wired as a high S first is they are wonderful givers. They have a really hard time receiving. And so, and another thing, and you just brought this up, another thing that I know is people that are high supportives oftentimes will not express frustration or irritation because S's are stability people. They want things to be smooth, no stress, everybody's relaxed and happy. If I have a volatile situation in a work environment, for instance, I want some people like you sitting in the room because you're going to help de-escalate the tension. The problem with that can be that sometimes S's will have swallowed so many grenades to help out the team that they don't know what to do with the stress they have themselves. And so one of the things we work on to help S's is how do we, like you said, self-care, what do we do to make sure while we're taking care of the whole world that we take care of us at the same time? And so that's a piece that I will spend a lot of time coaching on and working through. Again, there are some wonderful gift sets with S's: kindness, great listeners, usually very gentle toned. They don't like being in the limelight in general. Now you're an exception to that because your second trait is an I. So if someone is a heavy S, then they don't like being in front or, on a camera as much. That's harder for them. Your second trait, that I trait that you have, is still pretty high. And that's the one that is, I like to be out here doing this interview and I enjoy leading this event and I enjoy bringing people in to have these moments. That's your shining star piece of you. Eyes are really good at telling stories, at getting people excited to jump in and try something new. They're very good innovators. They'll usually be the first one to buy something that comes out on the market because they love to know what's going on all around them. They not only like to tell stories, but they like to have all of the inside scoop. And that's partly because, and another thing that was kind of a shock to me, this is my lowest trait. I didn't realize that you can have multiple best friends. And as I have coached people, I've discovered that a lot of I's have multiple best friends. In my world, that doesn't even remotely exist as a possibility. So it's interesting to see how different personalities perceive things. The challenge for you as an SI blend is that a lot of your value probably will come from how others see you. And that can be a very hard way to live if you're surrounded by people that don't see and appreciate you the way that that they should.
Mhm.
We tie our value to what other people think of us. The task-sided people have less of a struggle with that. I want people to like me. I want to have friends, but I'm okay if somebody is not my friend. And in the I
Mhm.
and the S part of the world, that's a lot harder. I think at least that's been my experience to see. So
Mhm.
in general, that's a couple of quick things. You're also very good at detail, which I know having worked with you a little bit over the last few weeks. So your high C is that detail part. So multiple emails, clarifications. Have we covered all of the bases before we have the conversation? Those are all coming from that C trait you have, right? So
Mhm.
that's in general a really quick overview. And I'm going to offer you right now, because we're not going to have time to do it. Usually I spend a whole hour on an assessment with a person.
Mhm.
So I know we don't have time for that today, but in general, those are your three really big strengths. And as I look at the graph on the right called the basic graph, that's you. And people often ask me, if I take this in 5 years, will it be different? I doubt it. We are wired. The only time we see big changes in the basic graph is if somebody has had a really big trauma. Now, where I
Mhm.
will see changes is on the environmental graph. We all adapt to what's going on in different environments. So when we're at work versus at home versus at church versus the grocery store, we may be elevating different parts of ourselves because we're in different situations. You know, you may be in a situation where the room is full of really high eyes that are full of energy, so you drop yours a little because you don't need to, or you may elevate it because everybody else is really high. That one can change quite a bit. But the basic graph of who you naturally are stays pretty close to the same. I'm looking at, when I look at those two graphs, do I see a lot of change from who you naturally are to who you are in your environment? Because if there's big shifts in that, then we're spending a lot of time out of our comfort zone. And so
Mhm.
I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, your S doesn't change an awful lot. It pulls down a little bit, not too much. Your C is almost exactly the same, and your I is almost the same. So, and your D, so your D, the driven personality, that's more your future thinking, goal setting, driven, make a decision quick and act type personality. You pull that down a little bit, which makes sense to me given your other gifts that you have. None of these alarm me, but when I'm looking at assessments, I'm often looking for, is there a big variance somewhere? Because immediately that tells me that somebody is put under a lot of stress. And if that's over a long period of time, they're either in the wrong role or there's something going on in their lives that's really heavy, that's causing a lot of stress, and they're going to get burned out or get sick or, you know, have some other kind of a reaction because they're not living naturally with who they are. We all
Mhm.
adjust some. It's like putting on a winter coat versus no coat in the summer, right? We do adjust, but we just don't want to do long periods. The other thing I would say to you, Tammy, is because the driven tendency is your lowest, if you have a day where you have to do a whole day of goal planning and futuristic thinking, I would guess that that fatigues you. Do you like to do
Yeah.
that?
I, I,
Okay.
I am I am driven to some extent, but I definitely need to regroup because I feel like some level I'm more of an introvert. I need that time to
Yeah.
recharge, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes. So on the days, and you will have days when you'll have to goal plan, whether it's your personal life or your professional life, on the days when we have to do something that's not as natural to our personalities, there's a couple of things to recognize. One, is there anybody you can bring in to help you with that? And two, build in some recharge right after. So I love what you just said about that, because I'm a keynote speaker. And yet my lowest skill set is the get on stage and be in front of people. I love it. I can do it. I will put myself out there and have a wonderful time. But when I get off the stage, I'm exhausted because I've
Mhm.
laid it all out there, and I'm an introvert as well. Just because I'm outgoing doesn't mean I'm an extrovert. So I will come home after a keynote and recharge for a day, probably clear my schedule, hang out at home, relax, not do anything. And that allows me to recharge so I can go out and do it again. Where somebody who's naturally wired for that could maybe do 5 keynotes in a day and feel more energy than when they started.
Mhm.
So it's recognizing, where are my draining areas? I will have to spend
Mhm.
some time in those. And what do I do to compensate for those and recognize that they're coming, and not put too many of them together if I can avoid it.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love how it highlights the inner outer world, like the real you versus how people see you. I mean, I do face reading and I do that as well. So I love that it's so laid out in such a nice way to see how that match happens on the inside out. And if we're really
Yes.
authentically allowing yourselves to be yourselves and care for ourselves. So yeah, that's I feel really a lot of alignment with that. So
Yeah.
I love
Good.
it.
Good. I'm glad. Well, and I think I'll only make one more comment about this graph. And again, normally I spend a lot more time, and I'm happy to do that with you when we're off the interview. But one other thing that is probably a big differentiator is the DI group in general love to talk things out. I'm a D first. So when I am trying to really get to the bottom of how I think or feel about something, my best approach to do that is to talk to someone else and have that volley of words back and forth. And people will mistake D's, will often make statements. So I might say the sky is green. And Tammy might say, well, okay. No, it's not. What are you saying? When we make statements, it's like we're putting it out there like a ping pong volley or a tennis volley. And now we're waiting for you to come back and say, well, no, I actually think the sky is blue with some white clouds. And D's are not offended by that. We like that back and forth statement to statement. And as it's like sharpening or chiseling a sculpture. As we're
Mm,
hearing that back and forth, it allows us to speak it out, look at it in front of us, kind of verbally and mentally, and then hear back what the response is. And then we reformulate our next statement. And we just keep doing that until we get to a place we're comfortable.
mhm,
I will tell you that for people, my daughter is a wonderful high D, so we have some amazing conversations and we can cover 1,000 things in an hour. For people that aren't wired like that,
mm,
it's overwhelming. It feels
mhm.
like machine gun fire, and they want to hit the table or under the table and just duck until we're done. And so it's important to understand that, because here's the flip side. And you were talking about you and your husband being different. So the C and S side tend to want to think things out. They don't want to talk it out. So give me a little information and then let me go process, and then we'll talk about it once I've had time to think it out. That's
Mhm.
a really important understanding of the difference in how things process. So if I'm coming at you and it seems like, as an example, that I'm being aggressive, I actually am saying, I really value you, Tammy. I want you to volley with me, because that really helps me process. So it's actually meant to be a compliment, even though it may not seem like one. Vice
Mm,
versa, you may say, I need some time and I need to not be offended. I need to understand you want to really think thoughtfully about what's been said to you before you give a response. So
mhm.
starting to look at those perspectives, and then, in my husband, in my case, because we are opposites, a D and an S, we've kind of come to a mutual spot where we can say, okay, rather than never talking about this, which might happen with an S, they will oftentimes, especially if they think there's conflict involved, it will get pushed far away. We just set a time. So I will make a statement and say, can we talk about this tomorrow at lunch? Or he may make an effort to try and talk about things a little sooner than he normally would. That allows us to kind of meet in the middle and be able to feel like we're both being valued and respected for the way we process things.
Mhm.
So that's
That makes a
another
lot of
little
sense.
information piece for you that's kind of fun, and I think a really big help to people as they start to interact with each other.
Yeah, yeah, to like not only know that something's off and different, but identify exactly why and then to operate differently and to build that deeper relationship connection, whatever that is, right? So
Yeah,
beautiful. I love
you
it.
just feel
Thank
so
you.
valued. You're welcome. And when we have time, and this is something I'm going to offer to everybody that's watching this, but when we are having time to go into more discussion, I also talk about what the things that you have to watch out for are.
Mm,
Where are your blind spots? What are the risks for you? And what can we do to protect you from those moments so that you're not as at risk for them? And we touched on it a little bit here, but that's something we spend more time on as well.
yeah,
So
which is super.
yeah, I do this with every client. I require this of every client that I take,
Mm,
because if I'm going to coach them or I'm going to come in, I'll do the whole team. We'll have the whole team take it if I'm going to be doing trainings. I want to make sure that the time we're spending is valuable to them and also
mhm,
valuable to me. I want to know that the effort that I've put in really was able to help someone. In order to do that, I need to understand, do they need time to think? Some organizations I go into, I have a whole room of thinkers. Some rooms are full of all talkers. Some people want to talk about the checklists and the 500-page report. Other groups want to just talk about the barbecue that we're going to have at the event.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. So that's part of the beauty of this, is it allows me to start to really tailor quickly to serve people where they are and to value them for the gifts they have.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment that I could see like exactly like for if you're someone that works with a lot of teams, whether that's group coaching for clients or whether that's for you're in a corporate environment, where you any situation that you're working with teams and being able to manage as a facilitator. Yeah, anyways, I just feel I could see like just some letters you could associate with someone's name and you can make a huge difference with the flow of that meeting and how much you could achieve as a team. And
Yes.
to be quickly not call someone out, but just say, hey supporters, it's time to come back and we're gonna like realign the energy of the group, so to speak. So anyways, I
Right.
think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it even little things like knowing that people, when they're out of control, typically are in their secondary behavior. So I would expect you might get really overly vibrant or way too dramatic or way too detailed because your second and third are fairly close together. You probably, when you're stressed, tend to go into those two behaviors more than going out of control in your S, which is another thing that we see. So it's kind of interesting, like let's say you're a parent at a baseball game and the coach is, you want to talk to the coach about something. You can start to apply DISC with the grocery store person, the gas station attendant, the coach. It's fun because you can interact differently with everybody you meet.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And I understand enough time, like we could talk more about it later. And I'll definitely, chat you up a little bit.
Okay, I can't wait. That'll be fun. And this is something I typically do with my clients as an hour overview first. That's the very first thing we usually do with the whole team. Because then we have a base of understanding that we can work from, and they can start to appreciate each other right away. And one of the things we'll talk about, I believe, in our shorter discussion or we'll have is two simple questions that everybody who's watching or listening to this can use right away before they even have an assessment that will help them to really start to think about how they're interacting and how they are themselves. So that's something we'll touch on later. But I don't know if you'd like to look at the last slide that I have here. I thought this might be helpful for people to see kind of the fun of how you take this to another step once you start to understand and reflect on yourself more, and also how other people around you are.
Yes, I will do that. I just know that the way I'm sharing something needs to be done a certain way. And so
Yes, it's just fine.
yeah, so I'll make sure I'll expand it, but please continue.
Okay, so I just wanted to show you, I did a quick composite graph. This is called a team chart. I did a little tiny one on the upper right side of this slide as well. So for people that are looking, the first slide that we're looking at of Kathy and Tammy, that shows how we line up together in the same space. So again, if we're looking quickly, Tammy is going to tend to be a think it out person. Kathy's going to be a talk it out person. So how are we going to adjust for that? I also recognize very quickly looking at this, Kathy's going to be task oriented first. Tammy's going to be people oriented first. How do we adjust for that? Having that understanding right away allows us to start to think about, we're both closer to the center. So that means it's a little easier for us than it would be for some. But there would be some give and take and getting really clear on what that looks like and how can we be supportive of each other. That might mean that we talk about the team first when I'm having a meeting with you. And it might mean that you come in with a quick bullet list for me, because that really helps me. I love bullet points. That's a big plus for me. I tell people in the DISC world, I'm a 30,000 foot, 500-mile-an-hour person. If you want me to land in your airport, you've got about 3 sentences to do that. If you get me to land, then you can bring me a 500-page report and I'll read it, but you got to get me to land first. That's different than how somebody else might be wired. So that's an example for the two of us. I just wanted to put us both on a chart together so you could see that. And then I did on the another smaller chart there with just a number of dots. And typically these have names with them. This one I just chose to do as an example. I can quickly look at a team. And I mean, what do you notice when you look at this smaller circle, Tammy? What do you notice about that?
We need to diversify and get some promoter influencer types into the team.
Yes.
Marketing person needs to come in here.
Very good. And it's really funny how just having that small circle of information can quickly tell us we have too many decision makers, too many intense people, too many. So in this case, we have a lot of task people and less people on the team. Now that may, depending on what kind of an organization is, that may make sense. But we really want to stop and think about, I had an organization that had a disc chart, something like this, and they had no one for the front desk when customers came in who was friendly and outgoing. They were all more withdrawn, withheld, private people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're trying to interface with a new client coming in, it's nice to have somebody who's a little more welcoming and a little more obvious in their friendliness on the outside. And they didn't have it. So, talking about, okay, what are we missing? What do we have too much of? Do we have somebody in the wrong place, or do we just have we hired too many people that are like us? That can be really, sometimes organizations can be a lot of C's and S's, which could mean that they're really slow to respond. C's and S's in general do not change quickly. They don't want to take any kind of fast movement. So that could be BlackBerry versus Apple. BlackBerry wants to make sure everything is going to be perfect. I've never done a disc of BlackBerry, but I wouldn't have been surprised if there were a lot of C's and S's on that team. Apple comes along with probably a lot of D's and I's and says, we'll just release one every year and charge people a lot of money and keep fixing it. And you can see how that played out, right? And so that can be something we're looking at, is do we have too many people who are moving too fast and they're not taking enough time to think it out? Or do we have too many people moving too slow and so you want to try to balance all of these quadrants to some level. So just like you noticed.
You know what, like, you've done a really excellent job to really highlight like the benefits of like learning these pieces, and some of the benefits and results that you could quickly look at a circle and really identify, not only for like a one-to-one or one-to-few, but to one-to-many. And so I want to, like, I need to wrap up, but and then I would love to, if you could share like maybe a testimonial, someone that has experienced your work, and just to highlight a bit more solidified way of what someone could actually get long-term wise. You know what I mean?
Sure. So I did put a few examples on this slide, but for those who can't see this, these are a few that I've received literally this year. I've gotten pages and pages of comments like this. One says, "You're absolutely amazing. In less than an hour, you managed to blow my mind in helping me understand my personality better, lean into impactful sales calls from that vantage point, and communicate better with my peers at work." That was with an hour conversation early on. I had another one that said, "If I could only explain how you've helped me today. I had a sales call and knew how to talk to her. Then I had a client call and understood her better than ever before. Thank you so
Wow.
much." And then I had, this is one you were asking about longer term. Typically what happens in these organizations, or even when I'm working with single professionals or entrepreneurs, we'll do some of this work first, and it grows and grows. So that may grow into team trainings and master classes and executive coaching for multiple levels of leadership. If it's an individual, we will go into coaching sessions and start to talk about, now that we started to learn this, what do we do with it? So this was an organization that serves people all over the United States. And they were having some post-COVID struggles because there were a lot of changes. So I was brought in to help with the change management and to really help identify some of the struggles. I think a lot of people listening can relate to probably that whole scenario. And this was from one of the lead individuals of that full organization. She wrote, "I appreciate all your support over the past year. We would not have achieved this reorganized, energized, and engaged team without it." And I can tell you, they were not in that space a year ago. So we were able to really take a lot of wonderful steps to change the environment that they live in. Work becomes more fun. People that used to drive us crazy become friends and appreciated cohorts, right? Hey, I really love that you have that gift. Thank you for sharing it. It's just the clients come in, or the customers of these clients, and they recognize more joy, more fulfillment, more purpose in the people that are serving them. They feel that. And so
Mhm.
that's going to translate into better sales and more referrals. And, so even though this is, I guess, what some would call a soft skill, absolutely it affects bottom line. It affects team turnover. Who doesn't want to be in an organization that cares about you and seeing you shine your best gifts?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
That brings a loyalty and a desire to do your very best for the company and for the customers. So I've worked in all kinds of groups. I've worked in education and finance and retail and healthcare and hospitality, and just a lot of them. A lot of the skills that you can learn with this are transferable across industries into your personal lives. I would say a large number of my clients, oh, can we do this with my spouse? Can we do this with my kids? I've got this group that I'm in that I really want to, and it's amazing to see that again, it's transferable. So as you learn these skills, it really benefits your whole life. And that's one of
Mhm.
the long-term benefits. I will never be the same the rest of my life from what I've learned with DISC.
Yeah, I can really see that. Thank you so much, Kathy, to like walk us through this. And I can really see for myself how this is so versatile, can support in so many different levels. And the benefits are, it's really just putting your intention on there, whether that's like sales to personal to like team management and bettering morale and all these things. So
Right.
yeah, this is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, how does one, if someone wants to get a hold of you, Kathy, and do you have a sort of an offering, or what would you say to the audience today?
Yeah, I'm really excited to offer this. So this is something I don't do often, but if
Mm.
anyone in this audience decides to try either the extended adult version or the leadership version, and again, these are still very inexpensive. You'll see that on my page. I am willing to do a 30-minute debrief at no charge to them. And I typically charge $150 for a 30-minute debrief. So I'm going to throw that in as a benefit at no charge to everybody listening that wants to do that. It'll be for the first 30 people who take the
Mm.
assessments with me. Just because of pure time, I have a lot of coaching clients, but I've
Yeah.
opened slots for that many so that people can get a debrief with me to talk about their uniqueness, and we can really help them understand themselves better so they can
Mm.
also help work with other people better. So if they want to reach me with that, I think you're going to have links below, but um,
Yes.
lioncrestleadership.com is my website, and there's a lot more information that'll be in the notes about how they can go about finding those assessments. But I'm excited to help people understand themselves better.
Yeah, and I love that. Like a lot of times we get tests and we really it's getting the test, but it's also decompressing it. So I really love how you're bringing that together and offering this like really nice value for everyone who's listening. And so yeah, if you're a part, whether you're a part of the summit or you're sort of just listening, just reach out to Kathy and yeah, be that first 30, or in the future if someone's listening to the future, maybe that's something that Kathy might be open to, but just reach out to her and we'll go from there. And Kathy, thank you so much again for sharing your expertise and to walk me through my assessment. Now that I'm more excited to dive in because Kathy was very generous and provided me I think 60, 70 page report or something like that. And now I kind of want to get my hands on it because I can see the juice in it now. So thank
Good.
you once again, Kathy. And yeah, thank you for being here and sharing all of you with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.